All right, so the other day I was being bad and I was at a pawn shop just kind of poking around, not in the market for anything, which is not the that's not the place you want to be when you're not in the market for anything, is a pawn shop, because you'll quickly change your mind. And I definitely did. I found this USP compact 45 for not the best deal, but it's a pawn shop, so I figured I'd try and haggle a little bit. I'm not the best haggler, but I got him down to $700 and still a little high. So I told myself, go home. I've got some money coming in like a week or two, some reimbursement from work. I'll wait till that comes in, and if the USP 45 is still there, I'll go get it. And so I went home that night, and while I was getting ready for bed, I was thinking about this thing, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'd been watching USP videos all day and decided that I was going to go first thing in the morning and pick it up, because it was kind of too good of a deal to pass up. And while I was, thinking about this as I was getting ready for bed, I was kind of scheming up things to trade for it, because it's a pawn shop after all, and I figured if I can get some extra money off, why not? I've got some stuff laying around I'm not using. And I ended up landing on the pawn, ironically enough, the only other pawn shop gun I have, the pawn shop Glock 17, that was, I think, the first gun that I ever had sent off and had work done to, which, would make it sentimental usually, but the fact that I had issues with failure to feed, it really just left a sour taste in my mouth, and I never really wanted to carry it or be in a situation where I had to rely on it. So it just kind of hung out in my case, in my pistol case. So when I'm trying to figure out what I want to try and trade for this, it was kind of the first thing that came into my mind, and I ended up going through with it. And I took the Glock up there and talked to somebody different the second time I went up there the next morning, and got them down to $650 before I mentioned that I had a gun to trade. And ended up telling him about the Glock, and he said, "Do you have it with you?" I said, "Yeah." And I went and got it out of the car, brought it inside, and he kind of looked it over. It's got a hand done stipple job by me, Wager machine, optic cut and Cerakote, suppressor item airglow sights, and I gave him one mag and some old shitty Glock case that I had from another gun. And he asked me, how much I was trying to get for it, and my only reference was what I paid, what I was willing to sell it to my friends for, and what a pawn shop had offered me for it maybe 6 months ago. So the pawn shop offered me $150. Obviously, I'm not going to sell it for that. That was store credit or cash. This was the first pawn shop months ago. I told my buddy I'd sell it to him for $300. I paid $400 for it. Had, some work done to it. I can't really get your money back out of work, because you don't have any, unless you do have the receipts, which I don't keep the receipts of who did the work. And Wager isn't, a nationally known machine shop. I mean, they kind of are in the arena of firearms, but these guys at this pawn shop probably aren't going to know the significance. So I told him $250, and he's like, "Man, I think you're right on the money," which immediately told me I should have asked for $300 or $350 and kind of negotiated down. But I was happy to get $250 for the Glock, no optic cover plate, no extra barrel like I have for it. I still have the extra competition barrel, and one magazine. So ended up getting this for the Glock 17 as I described it, and $428 out the door, tax and everything. So you can decide whether or not you think I got a good deal, but the important thing is I think I got a good deal. So if you feel like that's not the case, don't mention it in the comments so I can keep this facade going. But I genuinely do think I got a good deal. I consulted some people in a couple Facebook groups, and their consensus was, you should just go get that now. Like, that's not going to last, which I totally understand that sentiment, but in my town, it probably would have lasted. It probably would have sat there for quite a while, unless somebody like me just happens to go in that pawn shop, which I don't think happens very often. So that's the full story about where it came from, how I found it, and why I ended up picking this thing up. Because this is a gun that I've always wanted and eventually figured that I would have, but ideally the full size, and not anytime soon. So this is, like I said, something I wasn't in the market for And like I said, kind of a dangerous spot to be in a pawn shop that sells guns. So got it home, did a little bit of research, did a lot of bit of research on it because I didn't know much about this gun when I picked it up. So I'll just give you guys like a quick rundown, because if you're anything like me, you don't know a whole lot about these. You kind of know what they are. You've heard about them before. You've surely seen them in shows and movies. Let me clear this because I have been carrying this thing. So this is a USP compact 45 ACP, big honking round. I got my Federal HST 230 grain plus Ps because I love my HST. And it's from 2008. You can tell the date code right here on the slide next to the Staghorn roll mark, if that's what you want to call it. AI for 08. That should be 2008. That's something else I was actually kind of able to use in my negotiation. I asked them if I could take the slide off, check the internals, told them it was from 2008, and showed them how to check that. But it is a double action, single action, decocker and safety, which I don't know how common that is. I don't think it's very common, but I'm just kind of used to my CZs and 1911s. Not that I have one 1911 and I don't really mess with it too much, but I do know that in the instances I have guns with decockers and safeties, I usually don't have the two in conjunction. But this does. And it's a chunky gun. It's got obviously the paddle mag drop, which I think all HKs have. I don't know if they ever did a button mag. I want to say they did on some guns. But the slide is very heavy. The hammer is pretty low profile. This is obviously, optimized for concealed carry, but optimized around a much larger caliber than you typically see me or pretty much anybody carry these days. Some people, carry some various things, but most of the time it's 9mm or 40 Smith & Wesson. But I think this is cool. I think the 45 is like the quintessential USP. Like, that's the one you should get if you're going to get a USP, is a 45, because it's just iconic and it's a vibe. It's definitely a vibe to carry this thing. This is the most FUDD setup I think I will ever end up carrying. And it's not even that FUDD, but 45 hammer fired. I was carrying it in this leather holster for a little while and only felt safety on that because of that safety right there. And I'm not gonna lie, this was more comfortable than I thought it was gonna be, but it's definitely, like I said, a FUDD setup. But to continue on with the gun and the history of the USP Compact 45, I don't know a whole lot. I've done a lot of YouTubing and poking around online, but the best I can make, this is a design that originally came out in 40 Smith & Wesson, then was adapted to 9mm and then 45. It is the first gun to come with an accessory rail, from what I understand. If I'm wrong about any of this, just let me know in the comments. But this is just what I've researched over the past couple weeks, and usually from pretty reputable sources. So the double action pull is extremely heavy. It's very, I'm not gonna say very smooth, but it is smooth. It's a smooth double action, but it is a heavy double action. I wouldn't say it's like the worst, but it's definitely not the best. And then the single action is pretty light, very little take up, fairly defined wall. And let's see about a reset, because I haven't played with this too much. I've put a couple 100 rounds through it, but that's it. Reset, pretty long, but you can hear it. You can't really feel it, but it's definitely not so long that if you're going to town slapping the trigger, you're going to get trigger freeze or anything like that. That being said, this is not an easy gun to sit and rattle off rounds with. This is 8+1 in the magazine, and it kicks like a mule. This slide is very heavy. The gun itself is pretty bulky, but that still doesn't do quite enough to eat up the recoil that 45 puts out. Not that it's unshootable or anything, but I definitely gave myself a nice blister putting the 200 rounds through this. And it did only come with the one mag, so I reloaded this with 200 rounds worth of ammo. That's actually 211, because I picked up some middle of the road, cheapish Winchester hollow points to test hollow points, and now I've got 40 rounds of this Federal HST. But the gun performed flawlessly, zero malfunctions at all, and very happy with it, even though it kind of beat the shit out of me. But like I said, been carrying it in this holster, been enjoying my FUDD setup, and actually just got this G-code in today, and this is my first experience with G-code holsters. They were one of the only brands that offered a holster for this gun. It's a very difficult gun to find a holster for. You wouldn't think so, H&K being a pretty well-known brand, the USP being as iconic as it is, and this being a compact variant used to conceal carry. But it is. In my search for a holster, I stumbled upon probably 70 plus holster brands, maybe not quite 70. I'm going to estimate there's 80 plus out there, Kydex, leather, hybrids. But I did log them into an Excel spreadsheet, and I will put a screenshot of that on the screen now. And that way you guys can just kind of look through this list, and if you see anything that catches your eye, kind of search them up. Use this as a starting point if you're hunting for a holster for a gun that's not very common, that you feel like you might have a hard time finding a holster for, because I really struggled with this. And like I said, I feel like this isn't that bad. But some of these companies really offer a wide variety, and G-code is definitely one of them. They didn't have the USP Compact 45 in all of their different variants, but they had it, and I can't remember what this one's called, but this was right at $100 out the door with the canvas wrap camo, green Kydex, and it retains very well. You can adjust this. I mean, the trigger guard is about as good as it gets. You can adjust this to ride very low or very high in the waistband. No claw, but this is such a short handle grip. Handle, man. Really am turning into a FUDD. That it really doesn't matter, which is nice, especially if you keep it riding really low in the waistband. But that is pretty much it, guys. I mean, I'm just stoked to have such a cool and iconic, like I said, pistol. Haven't decided if I want to optic cut it or anything. I'm probably not going to. Hard to find a light that looks good on this, so I'm probably going to leave this totally slick, if you want to call it that, as it sits right now, and just enjoy the FUDDness of 45 ACP. And man, this thing just looks fantastic. You know what else I notice is normally the chamber side is the like beauty side of the gun to me. It has the details and stuff, but on this one, it's definitely this side with your slide stop, your safety, the engraving there. Yeah, it's been a killer gun, and definitely excited to take it out to the range some more and practice some more with it, because I think it's a really good litmus test, kind of, if you want to call it that. I don't even know if I'm using that term right for fundamentals, because this is definitely going to test your grip on your pistol, especially with the size and everything. So appreciate you guys watching, and thanks for checking out my USP Compact 45 with me.